Shabbat Shalom. On this Gather Shabbat, we begin with a question. Asked the Rabbi, how do we know when the night has ended and the day has begun? It was a very challenging question, to be sure, but the Rabbi's students, who were well-versed in matters of philosophy and religious thought, felt quite confident in their ability to answer. One of the sharpest pupils in the class said, "Rabbi, when I look out into the fields and I can distinguish between my field and the field of my neighbor, that's when the night has ended and the day has begun." Another shouted, "Rabbi, when I look from the fields and I see a house and I can tell that is my house and not my neighbor's, that's when night has ended and day has begun." A third student piped up, No, Rabbi, when I see an animal from afar and I can tell what kind of animal it is, whether a horse or a sheep or a dog, that's when night has ended and day has begun. Upon hearing these answers, the rabbi grew more and more frustrated. Ugh, no, none of you truly understands. What you are doing is dividing your field from the field of your neighbor, your house from their house, one animal from the next. But is that all we are able to do, to divide and separate and split the world into pieces? This is most certainly not the way. The wide-eyed students looked at their rabbi and asked, "Please tell us, how do we know when night has ended and day has begun?" Just then the rabbi looked at each and every one of his students with the utmost love and care and said, "When you can look into the face of the person beside you and call that person friend, then and only then will we know that the night has ended and the day has begun." This lovely story, adapted from Rabbi Ed Feinstein about the power of friendship and coming together, is also the story of our Gather program, our small groups initiative here at Temple Emanu-El. For at the heart of Gather is the belief that meaningful relationships not only build community, but also change the way we view the world and our place in it. Gather is about creating intimate spaces where congregants of all ages and stages can get to know one another. It's about connecting people through dialogue and conversation and shared experiences. Gather is about sparking friendships and building a sense of camaraderie and trust, because these are the things that carry us through the hardest moments in life. Yes, these are the things, friendship and fellowship, that remind us we are not alone, and the night will indeed soon break into day. And surely those involved in Gather would know, for Gather launched just as the pandemic swept our nation, and truly this humble initiative became a lifeline for so many. Simply talking to one another about sports or TV, politics or Shakespeare helped numerous congregants combat the darkness of those early, fear-filled days. And even now, as we have emerged into a different but still unsettling phase of the pandemic, Gather continues to be a source of constancy and joy for those involved. Over the course of 2 years, our Gather umbrella has grown. To our original Gather groups, we have added Gather Mingle for single members seeking friendship, companionship, and social opportunities, and Gather Family for Temple families looking to do the very same. We know that so many within our congregation are hoping to deepen their connection to other members and to the temple community writ large. And Gather is here to help every congregant find and build those connections. Gather is one way we make our large temple community feel small. It's my pleasure now to call upon two of our extraordinary Gather volunteers, Greg Rasin and Cameron Koffman, co-leaders or guides of our current events groups. Greg and Cameron have been with Gather since its inception. They took a leap of faith with the temple and with each other, and in the process, helped us realize Gather's vision. Undeterred by the closures of COVID, Greg and Cameron saw their groups through the pandemic with unmatched determination and steadfastness, showing up every month with love, with joy, and with loads of research. Indeed, these two have poured their hearts and souls into this endeavor, creating two dynamic and devoted Gather communities, each of whom care deeply about politics and the state of the world, but also they care deeply about one another. Greg and Cameron, our Torah portion this week, speaks about sacred occasions on the Jewish calendar. Without a doubt, you have made your Gather a sacred occasion on the Emanu-El calendar. We are so grateful for your time, your energy, your enthusiasm, and we are so blessed by your leadership. It is your friendship and fellowship that has helped so many of us realize that the night will indeed end and a new day will soon begin. Thank you, Greg and Cameron.
Shabbat Shalom. I'm Greg Rasin, and along with Cameron Koffman, we lead the two current events Gather groups. By the way, there's information about all 10 Gather subject groups and about Gather Family and Gather Mingle on the Temple's website. Cameron and I are pleased to be speaking to you tonight and shed some light from our personal experience on the Gather program that has fostered smaller community here at the Temple. Rabbi Sapadin asked that we each tell you something about ourselves. I was born in Passaic, New Jersey. I was graduated from Rutgers University and St. John's Law School since age 21. I've lived in New York. For 30 years, I was a partner at the law firm of Jackson Lewis, doing civil rights and employment defense litigation. In 2006, I joined Proskauer Rose. I've been there ever since and spent 3 years as the co-chair of their labor and employment law department. I have 2 daughters and I have 3 grandchildren, all living and growing up in this very, very troubled world. And I have a wonderful, loving, significant other. For years, I was like a nomad, searching for a synagogue where I would feel comfortable, never finding it until I joined Temple Emanu-El about 10 years ago. Cameron, how about you?
Thank you, Greg. So I grew up on the Upper East Side. I graduated from Yale, and then after my graduation, I immersed myself into local politics. I ran for the New York State Legislature. I set up a political consulting firm, and now, after managing her campaign, I work for City Council member Julie Menon, who represents the Upper East Side, East Harlem, Midtown, running her constituent services. And unlike Greg, the Temple has been part of my life for as long as I can remember. I actually went to preschool here. I went to Hebrew school here. I was bar mitzvahed on this very bima by Rabbi Ehrlich. My great-grandparents, my grandparents, and my grandmother is here today. My parents have all been members at the synagogue, yet I have never felt more connected to the temple than I do now. In just over 2 years, we have truly built a robust Gather community through our discussion of current events and politics, and this really did all come about quite organically, and I'll let Greg get a little bit into that.
Cameron and I first met back in December of 2019 at the initial Gather organizational planning session. The concept was initiated, as far as I know at least, by Rabbi Gross Prince, by board member Nicole Frankel, and the entire membership team here at Emanu-El. There was little or no idea as to whether the congregants would be receptive and participate in Gather. During the organizational session, Cameron and I both expressed an interest in current events and expressed an interest in joining a current events Gather group. So, being shy as I am, the next day I emailed Cameron and said, "Hey, how would you like to co-lead such a group?" From there, things really took off. There was an incredible interest among the temple members to join the current events group, not surprisingly, since we are in the run-up to the 2020 presidential election. There was so much interest that, and we were worried about having to put people on wait lists, that Cameron and I decided, with the temple's approval, that we would run 2 current events Gather groups. And we've been doing that ever since. There were 12 people in each group. There was a great deal of planning that went into that first session, which took place in February 2020 in my apartment on the Upper East Side. Cameron and I, for example, drafted a contract among the Gather participants, basically committing to be respectful to each other's views during our sessions. Well, both sessions that February were rather successful. There was a good deal of vibrant interchange, much about the then people running for the President of the United States, and we tried to make sure that everyone had an opportunity to speak. There was also a good deal of laughter as we got to know each other. Then COVID hit, canceling our second scheduled live meeting in March of 2020 and threatening the entire Gather program. Undaunted, I opened my own Zoom account, and with some trepidation on our part, and I venture to guess that of some people at Emanu-El as well, we met by Zoom in March of 2020. It gave about 25 people, all at home because of the terror of COVID, an outlet outside of their own families. The initial Gather groups, we were told, were a beta test that was initially supposed to end in May of 2020 and then would be evaluated by senior management at the temple. However, because of COVID, Cameron and I asked for permission to poll the members of our groups to see if they wanted to continue beyond May. The group's members voted unanimously to do so. So both groups met in March 2020 and uninterrupted every month since then by Zoom. In 2 weeks, we will meet for the 28th consecutive months. We like to think, Cameron and I, that in some small way, we helped to create a community here at Emanu-El.
Yes, it has been incredible to see these groups take a life of their own and continue with so much success. And I want to talk about a couple of the reasons why Greg and I think this is the case. First, no matter one's political views, no one can deny that there has not been a lot to cover over the past 2 years. And remember, we were originally concerned we'd run out of topics. Between the COVID pandemic, a presidential election, an insurrection, war in Ukraine, last year's New York's mayoral election, climate change, critical race theory, the Supreme Court, Governor Cuomo's rise and fall, the Biden administration, the Israeli prime minister election. Those are just a few of the topics we have covered. The second reason might seem like something obvious, but it does bear reiterating. Our members actually like each other. I count members as genuinely good friends. Our members email each other on their own accord about things going on in the neighborhood. There is a genuine camaraderie about the group where everyone looks forward to seeing their friends every month. That the temple could provide these sorts of friendships amongst its congregation is not something to be overlooked or taken for granted. As I've said, the temple has been in my life since I was born, yet I now feel most keyed in to the community. On a night like tonight, I have a group of friends who I've had deep conversations with, whose lives, whose careers, whose worldviews I've taken an interest in, and who have done the same for me, who are all sitting in this sanctuary together. And not to put Greg on the spot, but I feel lucky to call him a close friend. We actually had dinner about a month ago on the Upper East Side, the first time we got together in person, amazingly, since our February 2020 meeting. And after the dinner, Greg was earnestly texting me HSS doctor recommendations as I told him I needed to see a doctor for my back. He was sending me more stuff than my parents were. He checked in multiple times, so genuinely concerned about my well-being, and all of this, a friendship that emanated from Gather.
Unfortunately, I have a lot of information about HSS doctors. Yes, everybody in our Gather groups do care about each other, and that is why it's been so special for us to learn and grow together. By the way, I'm sure it's no surprise to any of you that in 2 weeks we will be discussing Roe v. Wade at our next Gather session. One final element I'd like to focus on is one of the intergenerational nature of all this. Cameron is definitely my youngest friend. I know that for all members of the group, the idea of sharing perspective amongst people of different generations is what really makes this group so special. We have some people in their 90s, Cameron's in his 20s, and everyone is equally eager to come together to listen and to try to understand different perspectives. The temple created a fabulous opportunity for Gather, for us to meet each other and have a forum for strong intergenerational friendship and exchange of ideas. Cameron, you want to wrap this up?
Thank you, Greg. I want to close this with three things. The first is that I want to thank our fellow gatherers, many of whom are here tonight. You have no idea how much the community that you have helped foster means to us. We can only hope that you take similar joy from that same community. Secondly, I want to thank the temple leadership for believing in this program, putting support behind it, and committing to it. We are so lucky to have a temple working on initiatives like this and that is trying to bring the congregation together in so many ways. The final thing, if you are watching us online or if you're in the crowd tonight, and this is the first time you've ever heard of Gather, I urge you to take the plunge and to consider joining a group. Again, as Greg mentioned, the temple website offers many Gather opportunities. And as you've heard tonight, 1 hour a month can go a long way. Thank you.